briefly a little bit about myself. I want to talk to you about the campaign, and I also want to talk to you about the challenge that is before us in Douglas County. Before I do that, I would like to tell you that a map of District 66 is against the wall back there, so you can take a look and see it, the district that I hope to represent. I would like to, of course, introduce one of my hardest campaign volunteers, my wife, Paula. Paula, would you stand up just so the folks can see you in the campaign? My campaign manager, John Goodfriend, is with us today. He is here. You know, I've been building relationships with Paulding County. You know, we have two folks here from Paulding County today. Our official photographer for today's event, Jim Ormond, is here taking pictures from Paulding County. Ron Davis from Paulding County reached out to our campaign just the other day and said, I want to help you, Bob. So we have got good organization building up there as well. But I really appreciate all you folks who are here to support us. We were going to have a representative from the campaign consultant team here today too, but a friend of his got sick. His responsibility was to get his friend to the doctor today, so he's going to show up. He says about 10 o'clock, maybe you'll get a chance to meet him, but it's a professional team that we have engaged to run the campaign. So, you know, we're off and running. You know, I served in the legislature for 8 years. Most of you know that at the end of my time, when Tom Murphy was still Speaker and Roy Barnes was Governor, they looped Bill Hembry's house into the district that I had represented for a long, long time with the declared intent of forcing the two of us into a runoff. I had a couple of years left in my flying career. It's not a good idea for Republicans to beat each other up in a primary if they want to retain, you know, a seat in the legislature. And so Bill and I had conversations, and I voluntarily walked away after 8 years of service for two reasons. Number one, didn't want to beat up Bill in a primary if I had to do that. Number two, I did enjoy those last couple of years of flying. But 2 years ago, I was approached by folks saying, you know, this seat has been created. It's an even seat. It's nothing like the seat that you represented. What you represented. It's going to be a difficult seat to win, but we would like you to run again, and that's basically what got me there then and what has me here again this day. You've heard about my service in Vietnam. I moved to Douglas County in 1972. If you do the math, I think I've lived here for about 41 and a half years. Shortly after that, I chose to express my Christian faith through the First Presbyterian Church in Douglasville, where we have been members, Paula and I, since 1973. The church you may know at the corner of Chapel Hill Road and I-20. A few years after that, I think it was a mistake to get somebody as young as I was at the time, but they elected me elder, and I've been serving as an elder in that congregation since about 1975 or 1976. And that is part of what motivates me to stay engaged in the political process. One thing that is important to me that happened, Ralph Hudgens, who is now the insurance commissioner, was a representative when I was a representative. And he invited me to a conference in Indianapolis in 1999 called the Character Conference, the International Character Conference for Mayors. And I went there, and I was so inspired about the character movement that I came home and completely just trying to see what would happen. I established, scheduled, set up with the help of what used to be Parkway Regional Hospital, where Home Depot is now. We had a meeting down there, and as a result of that meeting and so many people coming out to that first character breakfast, we established the Community Character Coalition of Douglas County in the spring of 1999. It became a 501c3 organization. I stayed in leadership of that organization until 2009. It is still a viable organization that helps the school board resource the mandated teaching of character education in the public schools, which is a noble, noble venture, and I'm pleased to have been a part of that. It's still going on under the leadership of Commissioner Ann Guider. They still fill the room every year at the Character Breakfast. They still raise money. They still give scholarships to kids who are kids of character. So a little bit about my background, and of course I've been married to Paula. We just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary. I guess that would have given away the age too, wouldn't it? At any rate, we celebrated 49, looking forward to 50 here coming up next year. To the campaign. If I am elected, I want to talk to you about 4 things briefly. The first 2 relate. We have an economy where private sector jobs are still having difficulty getting off the ground and growing. Job growth is a difficulty in our economy. I want to be responsive to local government officials. When I served for 8 years in the Georgia House, we would have a time that we met with the commissioners and the city council and the mayor and the district attorney's office and the judges and more to hear what their legislative agenda was for the coming year. And then we went down, when we agreed and when we got 100% support for that agenda, we would take it to the legislature and we would get it passed. And that's how we operated at the time, trying to be as cooperative as we could with local government, with the check and balance of a legislative delegation of 4 of us, 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat at the time. Well, part of the doing of the Speaker, Murphy, and part of the doing of Governor Roy Barnes was they divided our county into many legislative districts where we actually right now have a delegation that is composed of 5 Democrats and 3 Republicans, and of those 8 representatives, 1 of them lives in Douglas County, and 2 that I know really behave like they live in Douglas County. I've got to give credit to Micah Gradley and Mike Dugan because they really act like, with our local officials, that they do live here. But Kimberly Alexander, my opponent, is the only person who lives in Douglas County. I would think that a representative who lives in Douglas County would look out for the best interest of the folks in the county in which she lives. So she did go to the commission 2 years ago, and the commission said, we have an opportunity to create jobs at the Foxhall Resort, but Foxhall wants us to impose a 2% hotel-motel tax, the same tax that the city has been collecting for years, so that we can go in cooperation with Foxhall and have a resort which would involve construction jobs and a lot of jobs that would come to this county. She said, yes, I will do that. Until those folks who purport to represent Douglas County came in and said, wait a minute, we got a little political vendetta we'd like to pull here about the Board of Election because something that happened in Fulton County. So in order for us to pass what the local Douglas County folks want to do, you're going to have to change your Board of Elections. And my opponent at that moment backed away from her commitment to support the tax, and she did not until those folks, and I don't think it's unfair to use the word, bullied their way into the election board in order to allow this job creation activity in South Douglas County to at least have the potential for happening. I tell you that story to say that if I become elected to this seat, the 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, that will be the best that we can do, but with that balance, nobody will hold sway, and I commit to you that my job will be taking the wants and needs of the local folks to the legislature and arguing for those as strongly as I know how to do those. Number 2, you've heard about the federal fair tax. States, Virginia being the one that I know about, have recently moved from an income tax system to a consumption tax, a consumption-based tax system. The state of Georgia has talked about it. I know that there have been bills introduced, but I think because it may require a constitutional amendment for this to happen, the leadership is a little bit nervous about getting to this position too early to try to pass this bill without the necessary 2/3 vote in the House to pass a fair tax. The reason that the state party and the House caucus is so interested in my race is that if I am elected and the status remains the same in the other seats, which it looks like it will, Republicans will have a 2/3 majority in the Georgia House. That's why they're interested. And my pledge to you is that, and you know what a legislator can do and what a legislator cannot do, but my pledge to you is that if I am elected, the first week I'm in office, I will introduce a bill that will replace the income tax with a consumption-based tax in the state of Georgia that will be revenue neutral, which means no more money overall out of the pockets of the taxpayers of the state. That's something that I think on a statewide basis is something that will fly and will really generate jobs and bring people to the state that currently are not here in terms of job growth, economic growth, attracting business into the state of Georgia. Finally, the third thing that I'm wanting to do, and again, I just read this in the newspapers, this is public knowledge. My opponent had to be coached and somewhat criticized by the newspaper for a year in order to return phone calls to her constituency. Folks, if you were around when I served in the 90s, if you called me in my office, within 48 hours I was back on the phone talking to you. In fact, it was very interesting. I see Janet in the back of the room. Janet at the time was a lobbyist for an organization, and we struck up a friendship many years ago when I was there, but Janet was there, and she knows that maybe we didn't agree all the time, but I would listen. I would pick up the phone, I would listen. If I were called off the floor, I would listen, and that's what the job of a representative is about. You know, the people who vote for me are the people who put me there. The seat will not belong to me. The seat will belong to the people. And another thought just passed through my mind. The first bill that I sponsored that was passed through the legislature came from a constituent who lives off Campbellton Street just north of I-20. He brought me an idea, said, this is a great idea. I looked at it and I said, you know what, this looks like a great idea. It's kind of complicated. But I took the idea down to my House leadership on the Republican side when we were still in the minority, came up with the idea, we got it into the process. The Democratic leader, Larry Walker, at the time had the same bill there. He said, you know what, I'm too busy to carry this, Bob. I'm willing for you to carry that if you'd like to. And so we got this bill passed that came from the idea of a constituent who lived in Douglas County. So my third pledge to you, I guess it's the fourth if you count the first one as two, my fourth pledge to you is that I will pick up the phone and I will talk to you when you call. And I hope that you would do that, both elected officials and citizenry alike. That's what I will do. That's my style.